Igor Ban is a survivor of cancer from childhood. And since his high school days, he's been working as a volunteer with children and young adults who have cancer and other rare diseases at the Department of Mother and Child Health Care in Belgrade, in Serbia. After he finished and after he graduated in secondary medical school, he embarked on several psychosocial projects in the same medical university to bring children and young adults together to try and create that kind of organization, that community, that support. So the Childhood Cancer Parent Organization. And at the beginning of 2011, Igor decided that he wanted to lead a communications engagement project as part of that community that he had helped to create and he dedicated so much of his time to. He's also an assistant coach in martial arts, so I'm going to be very careful. And he's extremely active in promoting a healthy lifestyle and nutrition, so I might have to have a word with him. But most important, after all of that voluntary time, he's now decided that he's going to join the ECRD team at the end of last year as the online community manager in RareConnect to bring a community to life across the rare disease space. So with that, I'd like to ask Igor to come and join us on the stage. Igor, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share my personal experience with you. Well, to get started. My name is Igor, and I'm coming from Belgrade, Serbia. Since December last year, I'm a member of the RareConnect ECRD team responsible for the Balkan region. However, I'm not here to talk about my engagement in RareConnect, then to tell you my personal story as a long-term childhood cancer survivor. Now, I have to get back to my early childhood. Just to mention that I was born on 1989 in Belgrade. At that time, Belgrade was the capital of Yugoslavia. And I would like to remind those of you who know, and to tell ones who don't know, that about 25 years ago, in the middle of the Balkan region, between East and West, there was a country, Yugoslavia, with the Yugoslavian nation. Both of them were destroyed by the horrible war that lasted from 1991 to 1996, and finally finished by bombing Serbia in 1999. However, today my story is not about that war, then another one that ran parallel at the same time in my family. At the beginning of autumn of 1994, when I almost turned 5, and the one of the day of my brother's 3rd birthday, I started complaining about pains in my leg. My parents thought that the pain comes from a fight with my brother, which was a very common thing in our home. But this time it was not the case. Having conducted through in-depth analysis and checkups, it was confirmed that I had leukemia lymphoblast acute. At that time, I didn't know what it meant, and I couldn't understand what doctors and my parents were talking about. I was confused and scared to death. Some years later, my mom told me that she and dad were scared too, but she took advantage of my young age and came up with the story. She explained to me that some imprudent, restless creatures jumping from place to place had invaded my arms and legs with the aim of pestering me. But we didn't know where they came from. And when my mom realized that the abbreviated name of diagnosis, which is LLA, was similar to the title of the famous TV sitcom at that time, LLO, the idea for the story was born. Finally, we found out those creatures came from LA, really, and that they suffer from lunacy. So we called them lunatics from LA. I decided to expel them by force and declare the war against them. I started arming myself with dangerous weapons, but it wasn't enough to release me from the terrible pain I suffered. My parents asked our hospital for assistance. A very good female doctor worked there. After hearing my story about the lunatics, she promised to help me win this battle. Since my brother and I were very healthy kids, we didn't know about injections and pills, and when we had a regular childhood illness, my mother gave us syrups. But this time, it was no ordinary childhood disease, but a terrible war that required serious weapons. Like everyone, I was so afraid of needles. And my mom explained to me the doctor's weapon is not ordinary needles, then a very special and effective tool to eject lunatics. The nurse brought a special little covered screw, fixed it to my tiny arm and poured a magic potion that put stop to all pains. For me, it was a magic. The lunatics went completely crazy, running away in all directions. Sometimes, the doctor took out the lunatics from a hole on my back and hip, and I still remember that horrible pain. My mom told me that the pain comes from the lunatics who were scared to death of the doctor's glasses and consequently started beating, scratching, and pinching out of the fear the very moment they saw the glasses. Actually, it was a lumbar and bone puncture. At that time, there was no anesthesia, and I didn't know about that. But I'm terribly sorry that today the children in my country, in most cases, still don't know about anesthesia, although we are in a new millennium. At that time, I didn't know that I'm privileged because my home is 15 minutes far from the hospital. And my doctor let me go home to play with my little brother and to go to hospital once the doctor had made ready various red and white poisons for the lunatics. Unfortunately, other children had to stay at the hospital because their homes were far from Belgrade. I'm very happy that today there is a family house for accommodation children with cancer and their families. This first family house in Serbia is managed and maintained by a local parents group where my parents are still active. On the second day of my stay in hospital, I was terrified. I asked my mom whether I was going to die. My mom didn't know the answer, and she didn't want to lie. So she told me the same what her grandmother told her once long time ago. No one has a contract with the God, and nobody, including you, has the right to put such silly questions. Yeah. After spending a week in the hospital with an experience that was like a nightmare, we finally arrived home, and my dad says that there was a real disaster because of my younger brother Vladimir. He was even more dangerous than the lunatics themselves. He was jealous because I was somewhere with my mom and without him. So he expressed the wish to be blessed just like me. He cried bitterly, begging to be taken to the hospital together with me. In the end, Vladimir was taken to hospital as well to be examined just like me and finally to be rewarded with sweets, just like me. When I burst into tears, Vladimir became a raging dog and beat up every single person, which was fun to me. The lunatics were presently a little bit drowsy after the doctor had stunned them with different magic potions. Due to very low thrombocytes, it was very important not to wake lunatics. They could be disturbed by a blow, and my parents made every effort to avoid and eliminate every possibility of being smacked by Vladimir. It was very hard to accomplish because my brother and I were simply used to a free fight. However, we quickly realized that prohibition of fighting had positive sides. Vladimir was an incredibly quick learner, and when he gets into trouble and realized that the parents are mad at him, at very dramatic points, he would claim to have low thrombocytes. Yeah. Considering the fact that in any war, warriors must undertake special precautions, we did the same, trying to fulfill and keep to all doctors' advice. First of all, it meant bombing the lunatics with pills regularly after each meal, since they gather around swallowed food as soon as they start eating. I launched the bombs and killed them. Not to mention that my parents had to find candies that look exactly like my pills. For Vladimir, of course, who was delighted with this action. I had the obligation to visit the hospital at regular intervals, and I was always accompanied by Vladimir in his role of main assistant and entertainer. But there were many confusing situations. A woman, commonly called sister, waited for us in the hospital, but we didn't have a clue whose sister she was. Yeah. Now could we understand what a blood picture was, but soon we learned that doctors collect a couple drops of blood and then get a photo of them, blown up, put in fine frames and hanging on the wall, so as to discern the possible hiding places and weapons of the lunatics. Once it happened that the nurse told my mom that I had a low leukocyte count, and I was confused again. I already knew that there is a blood streaming along my veins, but then I learned that the blood contains tiny white particle leukocytes that are in fact my defense force against the lunatics from LA. But the army sometimes gets tired and becomes sleepy and need the magic potion swung into action again. The powerful liquid remedy was very expensive and some other warriors were in lack of it. So my parents asked for donations and provided it for other fearless kids as well. At the very beginning of the war, I started losing my hair. But since we had a dog, we experienced the situation of collecting the fur all over the home. To avoid a similar situation, Mom called hairdresser to trim my brother and me. We were much like escaped prisoners, and not like nicely trimmed kids. My grandfather, who himself has been hairless for a long time, explained to me that the only thing that matters is what one has inside one's head, not on it. I turned into a real veteran of the war against lunatics. But during my long-lasting treatment, I got used to being a general in the hospital. However, I messed things up because Mom and Dad were commanders-in-chief at home. They told me that I was not the only one with lunatics, since each of us have some different sort of lunatics and a secret weapon to fight against them. It appeared that the lunatics were a really secondary problem. The real problem appeared with my belief that I could do anything because I was under doctors' and nurses' protection. My parents were pretty angry and I could smell a real war. However, I won the first and the most important battle and the doctor permitted a deserved break. We went to the mountain, and here is what my mom wrote in her diary. It was only when we arrived in other surroundings and met people who hadn't a clue about the terrible battle in our family, we had forgotten the little common everyday pleasures and wishing for something not necessarily connected with the war. Despite this great victory, Igor still has to face a long road ahead of him. And whether we like it or not, he is still the general, and we are his advisors and supporters. In the meantime, we got a baby brother Ivan, who made our life more interesting and intense. But Vladimir was the happiest because he became an older brother. Today, I'm very much aware how lucky I am, because my leukemia was diagnosed and curable in Belgrade during the war in my country. I had such an amazing and dedicated medical team at the Hospital Mother and Child Healthcare Institute of Serbia. I'm very grateful for their incredible efforts to provide all necessary medicines at the time when there were no essential drugs. And I'm very lucky that I have a creative and imaginative family with a huge sense of humor that help all of us and me to become healthy and normal person today. And thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.